The trouble didn't start in the garage. It started the day the HOA decided that my very existence was a problem. From the moment I moved into this quiet cul-de-sac, Miriam Cole, the self-appointed queen of the board, had a grudge the size of Texas against me. I kept my property squared away, lawn trimmed, driveway spotless, flags folded sharp enough to cut glass. But what she couldn't stand was my garage, or more specifically, what she believed I kept inside it. I'm an army commander by trade. Discipline, preparation, and redundancy are not just habits, they're stitched into my bones. A garage, to me, isn't a messy afterthought. It's storage, training, order. But to Miriam, it was suspicion. She wore her authority like a crown, the kind that turned her clipboard into a sword. The first letter came soft, dressed in polite concern. Please adjust exterior storage. Reminder, community standards apply to all residents. I read it twice, shook my head, and filed it away. Typical HOA pettiness. Rules for rules' sake. I wasn't going to lose sleep over someone policing how I stacked tools in my own closed garage. Then came the fines. The first was a parking citation for a car I hadn't parked on the street in months. The second, a storage violation, even though my garage door was down and locked. By the third, an official warning about unapproved items visible from the street. It was obvious. Miriam wasn't sending reminders, she was sending a message. I reported every letter. Photographed each one. Logged the dates. That's military discipline for you, document first, react later. But Miriam wasn't playing by rules. One morning, I walked out to find my car windshield spiderwebbed with cracks, my front tires slashed clean through. A yellow scrap of paper sat under the wiper, scrawled in thick marker. Next time we take more. I crouched, taking photos, recording the timestamp, and then uploaded the video from my porch cam. The footage showed nothing but shadows. Whoever did it knew where the blind spots were. The sheriff came, a tired man with crow's feet etched from years of listening to stories like mine. He flipped through the photos, then met my eyes. Morale is a funny thing in neighborhoods like this, he said. Bullies like to test you. If you let this slide, they'll escalate. I nodded, jaw tight. So I should prepare for worse. Exactly. Keep your cameras on. And don't underestimate how far people will go when they think paperwork gives them power. Neighbors started acting strange after that. Some gave me cautious nods, like they wanted to sympathize but didn't dare. Others looked away when I mentioned Miriam's name. One man muttered, "Board has clout. Best to keep your head down." A retired schoolteacher whispered to me once, almost apologetically. Miriam likes to keep the place tidy. Tidy. The kind of euphemism people use when they've learned to look the other way. I didn't want to play vigilante. That's not who I am. Instead, I tightened security, extra motion lights, upgraded cameras with cloud backups, even a discreet ring of signs, private property, video surveillance. And I spoke to my daughter. She was sharp, old enough to know when danger hides behind politeness. If anyone shows up claiming to be HOA enforcement, don't open the door. Call the sheriff, then call me. She rolled her eyes the way daughters do, but her nod was serious. Still, the neighborhood began to feel different. The air thicker. The silence heavier. Conversation stopped when I walked by. Miriam herself turned up at community events with fresh smugness, clipboard in hand, eyes always on me. What unsettled me most wasn't the letters or even the vandalism, it was the shift in tone. That sense of being watched. Not random, not petty. Coordinated. When the military trains you, they drill into you one truth: patterns matter. And the pattern here was ugly. Miriam had moved from annoyance to harassment. The next step would be escalation. I thought my documentation, my cameras, and my level head would be enough. But I was wrong. This was only the beginning. The sheriff's words echoed in my head long after his cruiser pulled away. Bullies escalate if unchecked. I'd heard the same in combat zones, different enemies, same psychology. Let a thug push once and they'll come back with reinforcements. So I didn't waste time. That same evening, I walked the perimeter of my property the way I'd walked wire fences in Afghanistan. Every corner. Every angle. I took stock of the blind spots. My porch cam caught most of the front yard, but there was a sliver near the garage that was vulnerable. The alley behind my backyard? Practically a welcome mat. I made a list. Motion lights. Cloud back cameras. Signs to remind anyone lurking that they were being watched. By midnight, the driveway was lit bright enough to spook a raccoon. The backyard bristled with new sensors. The signs went up on each fence post: private property, video surveillance. But security doesn't erase paranoia, it amplifies it. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep. Every passing headlight painted shadows that lingered too long. I told myself it was just nerves, that vigilance was better than complacency. Still, sleep came in fits. The next morning, the whispers began. I walked my daughter to the bus stop. A neighbor across the street, man in his 50s, navy cap on his head, looked up as I passed. He gave me a brief nod, almost sympathetic, but his eyes darted nervously to the corner where Miriam's house sat. Like he was afraid the clipboard queen would see him being civil. Another neighbor, watering her roses, dropped her gaze the second I waved. Her lips pressed tight. The message was clear: people knew something, but they weren't going to get involved. At the corner, I caught a retired schoolteacher I'd spoken to before. She leaned in close, voice barely above a whisper. Miriam likes to keep things tidy, she said again. This time, though, her eyes flicked toward the new camera on my eaves. I frowned. Tidy doesn't explain /tires. Her hand trembled around her watering can. You didn't hear it from me. Then she turned her back, shutting the conversation down like a slammed door. By the time I walked home, the paranoia was no longer just mine, it was collective. People wanted no part of this fight. And Miriam knew it. That evening, I spotted her at the community park during a neighborhood cookout. Clipboard clutched like a weapon, she moved between families, smiling, jotting notes. Every so often, her eyes cut in my direction. When she saw me watching, her smile only widened. When I approached, she didn't bother pretending. "Commander," she said sweetly, "we're concerned about community safety." "Funny," I replied, "so am I. Sheriff has the reports if you'd like to review them." Her grin sharpened, predatory. "Careful. You're making enemies." That phrase again. It wasn't a warning, it was a promise. Later that night, while reviewing my camera feeds, I noticed something subtle. A car slowing in front of my house. The driver didn't stop, didn't park, just cruised, lights dimmed, slowing just enough to survey. I zoomed in, but the plates were covered with a plastic glare shield. Intentional. Professional. I logged it in my file. Time, date, make, model. If this was intimidation, it was escalating. My daughter noticed too. "Dad, you're getting paranoid," she teased, peeking at my laptop. "Paranoia's just preparation with bad PR," I said, half a smile tugging my mouth. She rolled her eyes, but her voice softened. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" I turned to her, the weight of years in my tone. If someone is willing to break windows and slash tires, they're willing to break people. So yes. I'm serious. For a moment, the house was quiet. Just the hum of the fridge, the faint buzz of the lights. Then a sound, soft, deliberate, scratched against the side of the house. We both froze. I pulled the live camera feed. The motion sensor had triggered. A shadow stretched along the siding, just out of full view. Then, just as quickly, it vanished. The footage showed nothing more than a blur. Could have been a stray dog. Could have been something worse. My daughter swallowed hard. "Still think it's just pettiness?" I shook my head. "No. This is coordinated. Miriam's war had started quiet. But wars never stay quiet for long. And in the silence after, I knew the sheriff was right. This wasn't about fines, or rules, or tidy neighborhoods. It was about power. And the people hungry for it rarely stop until someone pushes back. HOA meetings were supposed to be boring. Budget discussions, landscaping schedules, arguments over paint colors. But when I walked into that cramped clubhouse on a Tuesday evening, I knew this wasn't going to be routine. The room was packed tighter than usual. Neighbors filled the folding chairs, some standing in the back. A line of fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everyone in the same washed-out glow. At the front sat the board, 3 members in matching polos, and, at the center, Miriam Cole. Clipboard in front of her, posture perfect, a smile sharp enough to slice glass. I carried a folder thick with printouts. Photos of vandalized tires, the shattered windshield, screenshots of threatening notes, and stills pulled from my security feeds. On top, the official police report signed by the sheriff. The meeting opened with chatter about trash pickup and dues, but my turn on the agenda came fast. Miriam called my name with that faux cheerful tone of hers. "Commander, you have the floor. We understand you've raised some concerns." Concerns. As if slashed tires were a scheduling conflict. I stood, unfolded the folder, and laid the evidence on the table. My voice stayed calm, but it carried across the room like a drill instructor's. These are photographs documenting repeated vandalism and threats directed at me and my property. Each incident has been reported to the sheriff. Here are the timestamps, camera stills, and signed reports. Murmurs spread across the audience. A few neighbors leaned forward to see. Others kept their eyes on the floor. Miriam's smile never faltered. She glanced at the photos like they were doodles from a child's notebook. "We appreciate your thoroughness," she said smoothly, "but I think we're conflating private disputes with community matters." I felt my jaw tighten. When my property is vandalized and threatening notes are left, it's not a private dispute. When neighbors mention your name in whispers, it's not coincidence. This is targeted harassment. For the first time, a crack appeared in her mask, a twitch at the corner of her mouth. But she recovered instantly, folding her hands on the clipboard. "We're concerned about community safety," she replied. "You're making enemies." The phrase landed like a nail driven into wood. Deliberate. Practiced. Not a warning. A declaration. A ripple went through the room. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably. One man in the back muttered something I couldn't catch. I leaned forward, voice lowering but sharper than a blade. "You're admitting this is retaliation." Miriam's eyes glittered. "I'm reminding you that this is a community. We all want harmony. If your actions disturb that balance," she let the words hang, unfinished, as if silence itself was a threat. I took a deep breath, controlling the heat in my chest. Rage doesn't win wars, discipline does. I gathered the documents, stacked them neatly, and looked her dead in the eye. I won't be intimidated. Every letter, every fine, every threat, I've logged them. And if anyone here thinks I'll roll over, they're mistaken. I swore an oath to protect, not to surrender. That applies here too. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Miriam tapped her pen once against her clipboard, then dismissed me with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Thank you, Commander. We'll make a note of your testimony." The meeting moved on, but the air was different now. I saw it in the neighbors' faces, some a little braver, some more afraid. Miriam had flexed her power in public, and I had called her out. That made me a problem. As people filed out afterward, a few gave me quiet nods of respect. One woman whispered, "Be careful." Another pressed a slip of paper into my hand with her phone number, saying she'd been fined unfairly too. But most hurried past me, eyes down, as if standing near me might put them on Miriam's blacklist. Outside, the night air felt heavier. The street lamps buzzed, casting long shadows across the pavement. Miriam exited the clubhouse last, clipboard tucked under her arm. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. The smugness in her stride said it all. I walked home with the folder under my arm and a pit in my stomach. The sheriff had been right, bullies escalate. And Miriam had just drawn her battle line in front of the whole neighborhood. She thought intimidation worked. But intimidation only works on people who haven't been tested. I had been tested. And I knew exactly how to answer. The night after the HOA meeting, sleep refused to come. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside, had me alert. Years of service had trained me to rest anywhere, even in the back of a Humvee during mortar fire, but this was different. This wasn't a combat zone I could rotate out of. This was home, and it was under siege. By 3 a.m., I was pacing the living room, folders spread out across the coffee table. The evidence was damning, but evidence only mattered if someone acted on it. The sheriff had warned me. Miriam had threatened me. And the neighbors? Half were too scared to blink without permission. That's when my phone buzzed. A name I hadn't seen in weeks flashed on the screen, Marcus Tillman. Marcus had been my right hand overseas. Military police. Calm under fire. The kind of man who could talk down a drunk with an AK or cuff a hostile without breaking a sweat. We hadn't served together in years, but one thing about the Brotherhood, it never expires. I answered before the second ring. Marcus. His voice was steady as always. Heard a rumor you're having trouble stateside. I frowned. Word travels fast. You didn't think folks stopped looking out for you, did you? A buddy of mine in the sheriff's office mentioned your name. Said some HOA queen bee is making life hell for you. I let out a dry laugh. Queen bee is putting it mildly. She's running this neighborhood like a cartel boss. Last night she told me I'm making enemies. Straight to my face. In front of everyone. There was a pause, then Marcus spoke in that clipped tone I knew so well. That's not a warning. That's a promise. Exactly my thought. By noon the next day, Marcus was in my driveway. Same squared shoulders, same sharp eyes. He carried no weapon, didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to shift the air. We sat on the porch, folders open, coffee steaming between us. I laid out the incidents one by one. Tires. Windshield. Threats. The HOA meeting. Miriam's veiled menace. Marcus skimmed through, his jaw tightening as he flipped each page. Finally, he set the folder down. This isn't random harassment. This is pressure. They're probing you, testing your boundaries. Standard intimidation protocol. I nodded. Feels coordinated. It is. And you can bet she's got more muscle in the wings. Nobody like Miriam moves solo. She's building a perimeter of fear, making examples out of you to keep the rest in line. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. So what's the play? Marcus's eyes sharpened, the way they always did before he laid out an op. First rule, don't react emotionally. They want you angry, sloppy, predictable. We flip that. You stay steady, disciplined. Document everything. Every violation, every word out of her mouth. Build a record that's airtight. I nodded. Already doing that. Second rule, he continued, control your perimeter. Cameras on every angle. Lights on timers. Don't give them blind spots. If they step foot on your property, you'll know. That matched the drills we used to run overseas, deny the enemy cover, deny them surprise. And the third rule? I asked. Marcus leaned in, voice low. We gather allies. People here are scared, but they're tired of living under her thumb. All it takes is one person standing tall, and the rest will find their spine. You've already started that at the meeting. Now we push it further. I could almost feel the gears turning. He was right. Miriam's power wasn't absolute, it was borrowed, stolen from fear. Strip that away, and she was just another petty tyrant with a clipboard. Marcus clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. You're not alone in this, brother. And if she thinks she can intimidate a man who's been through what you've been through, she picked the wrong damn target. For the first time in weeks, the knot in my chest loosened. Not gone, but lighter. Backup had arrived. That night, Marcus helped me realign the cameras, set new motion sensors, and map out possible approaches to my house. We walked the perimeter like we used to patrol wire fences overseas, methodical, silent, thorough. When we were done, Marcus stood in the middle of the yard, surveying it all. She'll come again, he said flatly. Bullies always do. But next time? We'll be ready. The cicadas hummed in the dark. My house stood quiet, fortified, no longer just mine but part of something bigger, a defensive line. For the first time since Miriam started her campaign, I didn't just feel like a target. I felt like a soldier again. And this neighborhood? It had just become my battlefield. 3 nights after Marcus arrived, the knock came. It wasn't a polite knock, the kind neighbors use when they're dropping off misdelivered mail. This was 3 hard pounds, spaced evenly. Tactical. The kind that said open up, now. Marcus and I were in the living room, going over the camera feeds. His eyes met mine instantly. No words needed. He slid silently toward the side window while I eased toward the door. Who is it? I called, voice firm. HOA enforcement, a deep voice answered. Open the door, sir. We need to conduct an inspection. HOA enforcement? There was no such thing. I flicked the switch for the porch light, bathing the front step in a hard white glare. 2 men stood there, khaki pants, black polos with cheap-looking badges stitched over the chest, and utility belts that carried just enough gear to look official. But their stance? Wrong. Their eyes? Too alert, too hungry. I'd seen real officers, military police, federal agents. These weren't them. Marcus whispered from the window, not cops. Not even rent-a-cops. Muscle. The taller one knocked again, harder. Sir, refusal to comply will result in penalties. We're authorized to inspect for illegal firearms. Illegal firearms. The words were so rehearsed they almost tripped over themselves. I felt the heat rising in my chest, but I kept my tone calm. Show me a warrant. The shorter one smirked. We don't need one. This is HOA jurisdiction. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He mouthed one word, protocol. We drilled this overseas. When enemy forces tried intimidation, step 1 was always the same, gather intel before engagement. I opened the storm door just enough for the chain lock to hold. The taller man leaned forward, flashing an ID card that looked like it had been printed at a copy shop. The logo was the HOA emblem Miriam used on newsletters, but the laminate was peeling at the corner. Pathetic. Sir, the tall one said again, voice flat, non-compliance will escalate consequences. That was it, the phrase. Escalate consequences. The kind of thing a thug says when the script runs out. I smiled, slow and deliberate. You boys picked the wrong house. I shut the door, threw the deadbolt, and gave Marcus a nod. He was already pulling his phone, recording through the window as the 2 imposters muttered to each other. They didn't leave right away. One of them walked around the side yard, shining a flashlight along the fence. The other stayed at the front, trying to handle even though the locks were engaged. Every movement, every word, captured on camera. Finally, after 5 tense minutes, they retreated. Their SUV idled at the curb, black paint job, no plates on the front. When it rolled away, Marcus stopped recording. Professional intimidation, he said flatly. She's testing your threshold again. Seeing if you'll fold. I exhaled slowly. And? He gave me a grim smile. You didn't fold. Which means next time, she'll hit harder. That night, we reviewed the footage frame by frame. Marcus uploaded copies to a cloud server, one under his account and one under mine. Redundancy, always double secure. We printed stills of the fake badges, the SUV, the faces caught under the porch light. By morning, word had already spread. A neighbor texted me, "I saw two guys at your place last night." What's happening? That was the first crack in Miriam's armor. Intimidation works in the dark, but sunlight exposes rot. The more people saw, the less control she had. But I knew what Marcus knew: exposure only makes tyrants more desperate. Miriam had played her next card: fake cops, staged authority, brute intimidation. And it meant one thing. The real fight was about to begin. The morning after the fake cop stunt, I brewed the strongest coffee I had and stared at my garage like it was a battlefield. They crossed the line. Petty fines, vandalism, intimidation, that was one thing. But impersonating law enforcement to seize my weapons? That was an act of war. Marcus sat across from me, calm as always, his posture straight, eyes scanning every corner like a hawk. He didn't need coffee. Men like him ran on discipline and muscle memory. "You know what this means," he said quietly. I nodded. "She escalates, we escalate." He smirked faintly. Protocol Bravo? It had been years since we said those words. Back in the desert, Protocol Bravo meant one thing: enemy infiltration was inevitable, so you harden defenses and prepare countermeasures. "Yes," I said, the weight of command sliding back onto my shoulders. "We're going Bravo." Step 1: secure the perimeter. We started in the daylight. Cameras were repositioned, overlapping like concentric circles of fire. Blind spots were eliminated. Marcus brought out 2 trail cams from his truck, infrared, motion-triggered, with SD cards the size of a thumbnail. We placed them discreetly in trees and under the eaves of the roof. Then came the sound traps, thin wires tied to tin caps, strung along the side fence where an intruder might crawl. Old school, but reliable. If someone breached at night, we'd hear the faint clink before they reached the house. Layered defense, Marcus said with satisfaction. Just like Fallujah. Step 2: psychological counterplay. I printed enlarged stills from last night's footage: the imposters, their fake badges, the SUV without plates. That afternoon, I slipped copies under the doors of 3 neighbors I trusted. Not gossipers, not fence-sitters, people who had quietly given me sympathetic looks at HOA meetings. No explanation, just a note: they came for me. They could come for you next. Stay alert. Fear spreads fast, but truth spreads faster. By nightfall, Marcus's phone buzzed non-stop. Neighbors were texting, calling, finally speaking out. Turns out Miriam's reign of tidiness had left a trail of resentment longer than I imagined. She hadn't just picked on me, she'd fined widows for garden stones, bullied veterans for flagpoles, even threatened to tow cars parked half an inch over the line. Now people were angry. Step 3: bait the enemy. "You know she won't stop," Marcus said, voice flat as stone. "I know," I answered. "That's why we're going to let her try again, on our terms." We set the bait in the garage. Not the real arsenal, those stayed locked in my interior safe, hidden behind reinforced steel. Instead, Marcus helped me stack a few decoy cases, locked ammo cans filled with scrap metal, a couple of old, inoperable rifles from a pawn shop I kept for parts. To anyone else, it looked like a stockpile worth seizing. We angled a camera overhead, concealed in the rafters, aimed dead center on the cases. Every second would be captured from multiple angles. This time, Marcus said with a wolfish grin, "We don't just defend. We record everything. We expose everything." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt like a signal, every gust of wind against the siding like footsteps. But beneath the nerves was a steel resolve I hadn't felt since deployment. Miriam thought this was still an HOA squabble. She had no idea she'd stepped into a battlefield designed by soldiers. Marcus sat watch by the kitchen window, rifle resting against the wall, posture relaxed but ready. "When they come," he murmured, We'll handle it by the book. Calm, controlled, airtight. I nodded, hand brushing the pistol at my hip. The trap was set. And the next move was Miriam's. The night was quiet, too quiet. No cars on the street, no porch lights flicking on, no dogs barking. Just that heavy silence that usually comes right before a storm. Marcus sat in the living room, one earbud in, listening to the camera feeds. I was at the kitchen table, sharpening a knife out of habit more than necessity. Years in the army drilled that into me: if you wait for trouble, keep your hands busy. Then the alert pinged. Marcus straightened instantly. Back alley. For Heath's signatures. I slid my chair back silently, adrenaline flooding my veins. 4 again. Same number as last time. They hadn't learned. Or maybe Miriam hadn't given them the option to. We moved like clockwork. He grabbed his rifle. I holstered my pistol. No panic, no wasted words. Just precision. The back camera caught them first: reflective vests, crowbars, bolt cutters. And there it was again, cheap badges dangling from lanyards. HOA enforcement. If it wasn't so dangerous, it would have been laughable. One of them hissed, "Garage first. Grab the crates." Perfect. They were going exactly where we wanted. The breach. The metallic screech of the pry bar echoed through the night. I counted under my breath: 1, 2, 3. The latch gave, and the garage door rolled up with a groan. The imposters rushed inside, flashlights sweeping across the cases we'd stacked as bait. "There," one of them said, excitement in his voice. Just like she said. "Guns." Marcus tapped my shoulder. "Time." We slipped out the back door, moving low, circling to the garage side entrance. My heart thudded, but my training kept my steps steady. When I pushed the door open, Marcus flanked me, rifle angled low but ready. "Evening, gentlemen," I said, voice carrying in the enclosed space. They froze. Again. The tallest one spun around, clipboard in hand like a shield. "Sir, this is official HOA business. These weapons are unregistered and must be confiscated." I almost laughed. "You're standing in my private garage at 2 in the morning with crowbars. That's not confiscation, that's burglary." One of them stepped forward, trying to puff himself up. "We have authority." Marcus barked out a harsh laugh. "Authority from Miriam Cole? That's worth less than toilet paper." The shorter man, jittery as before, lunged with a set of cuffs. He must have thought surprise would work twice. It didn't. I sidestepped, twisted his arm, and slammed him against the workbench. The cuffs clattered to the floor, echoing. His cry of pain was drowned by Marcus's thunderous shout as he slammed another thug into the concrete with a clean takedown. The last two rushed us together, crowbars raised. Bad move. Marcus swung his rifle like a staff, knocking one square across the chest. I caught the other with a forearm to the jaw, followed by a knee that dropped him flat. In less than 30 seconds, all four were on the ground. Moaning, cursing, groaning. The fight was over before it started. Exposure. I raised my voice, calm but commanding. "Listen carefully. Every second of this is on camera. Breaking and entering. Impersonating officers. Attempted theft. Conspiracy." Their eyes widened. One of them whispered, "She told us it'd be easy. She said you'd fold." "Yeah?" I pressed. "Well, she was wrong. And you just ruined your lives for her power trip." Marcus pulled out his phone, dialing the sheriff. "We've got 4 suspects detained. Fake badges, burglary tools, attempted assault. All on video." As the sirens wailed closer, the imposters panicked, squirming like trapped animals. But they weren't going anywhere. Marcus and I had them pinned, their cheap HOA costumes shredded under the weight of real evidence. When the deputies stormed in minutes later, the scene spoke for itself. 4 intruders cuffed, Footage ready, weapons untouched. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. The fear wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. Miriam Cole had sent her army. And her army had fallen flat on its face. The deputies didn't waste time. They cuffed all 4 imposters, read them their rights, and bagged their fake IDs, crowbars, and bolt cutters as evidence. The whole garage smelled like sweat and adrenaline, but the sight of flashing blue and red lights out front brought a wave of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. One deputy shook his head after watching the footage Marcus uploaded. "I've seen some dumb stunts, but this? Fake HOA cops trying to raid a private residence? That's a new level of stupid." I just nodded, jaw tight. It wasn't stupidity, it was malice. Miriam Cole's malice funneled through men too desperate or too reckless to realize they were pawns. The cracks open. The next morning, the neighborhood buzzed like a disturbed hive. People came out of their homes, whispering, staring at the sheriff's cruisers that had blocked the street last night. By noon, the first confession slipped. One of the arrested men told deputies they'd been hired directly by Miriam, promised HOA protection if they helped enforce her will. Another admitted they were behind the vandalism, my tires, my windshield, even the threatening notes. The texts on their phones tied it all together, screenshots of Miriam's instructions, pictures of my house, reminders to scare him into compliance. When that evidence hit the sheriff's desk, the game was over. The Queen falls. 2 days later, deputies showed up at Miriam's door. Clipboard in hand, she tried her usual act, smile sharp as glass, voice dripping superiority. But when the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, that mask cracked. The charges were ugly: harassment, conspiracy, criminal mischief, and solicitation of burglary. Small-town politics didn't shield her anymore. The law had teeth, and for once, she was on the wrong end of the bite. The board collapsed overnight. Neighbors who once stayed silent started telling their own stories: unfair fines, threats, bogus citations. Miriam's tidiness crusade had been nothing but control and intimidation, and everyone knew it now. Justice served. In criminal court, the imposters cut deals, probation, fines, permanent records. Miriam tried to fight, but her arrogance only dug her deeper. The judge made it plain: she had abused her position, weaponized her HOA, and endangered the community. The gavel dropped. She was fined heavily, barred from ever serving on a board again, and left humiliated in the very neighborhood she once ruled. Civil court was my turn. I sued for harassment, property damage, and punitive damages. The HOA's insurer settled for $100,000 and legal costs. Miriam herself had to pay $15,000 out of pocket. For once, the Queen felt the sting of accountability. Aftermath. Weeks later, I stood in my garage with Marcus, looking at the cases they had tried to steal. My arsenal was intact, my walls repaired, my home secure again. Neighbors who once avoided me now stopped by, shaking my hand, thanking me. One elderly widow said softly, "You didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for all of us." That hit harder than the payout, harder than the victory in court. Marcus grinned at me over the workbench. "Not bad for a suburban deployment, Commander." I smirked. Didn't need a platoon. Just the right man at my 6. He chuckled. "You know what the difference is between an HOA and insurgents?" I raised an eyebrow. He said, "Nothing, except insurgents usually know when to quit." We both laughed. The final lesson. Miriam Cole thought paperwork and intimidation gave her power. She thought she could bend a soldier into compliance. But she forgot the one rule every commander knows: bullies thrive until someone draws the line. I drew it. Marcus held it. And the sheriff hammered it home. The HOA was rebuilt under new leadership, stripped of its fangs, focused on community instead of control. For the first time since I moved in, the neighborhood felt like home. Miriam lost everything she clung to. I didn't just win back my peace, I reminded everyone here that you don't bow to tyranny, no matter how small or petty it looks on the surface. They came for my guns. They walked away with handcuffs. And that's a fight I'd win every time.